Did you know that some Roman prisoners, especially those condemned to the mines, might have eaten better than the poorest free citizens of Rome? It sounds unbelievable, but the evidence is there, hidden in the remains of ancient meals and the records of the empire. While we often imagine prisoners as starving and neglected, the truth is far more nuanced and surprising. We often picture ancient prisons as places of starvation, misery, and neglect. But the reality was more complex. Roman prisons were not just dungeons of despair, they were also places where the needs of the empire shaped daily life, even down to what was served in a simple clay bowl. Food for prisoners reflected their social status, the nature of their crime, and the ever-changing needs of the empire. A wealthy prisoner might bribe guards for better meals, while a common laborer received only the basics. The empire's priorities were always at play, deciding who got what and when. Rome needed its prisoners to work, especially in the brutal mines and quarries. To keep them productive, rations had to fuel hard labor, meaning that, paradoxically, some prisoners were better fed than the destitute on the streets. The empire couldn't afford to let its workforce starve. This meant steady supplies of grain, oil, and sometimes cheap wine or pungent fish sauce, basic, filling foods that provided energy. In fact, these rations could be more reliable than what many beggars or the urban poor received, who depended on charity or luck for their next meal. The contents of a prisoner's bowl reveal not just what crops were cheap and plentiful, but also how the state managed its resources. Barley, lentils, and sometimes beans filled these bowls, foods that were easy to store and transport, and that kept prisoners alive and working. Prisoner food exposes the priorities of ancient societies. Was the goal to punish, to extract labor, or simply to ensure survival? The answer often depended on the needs of the empire at that moment, and the value placed on each prisoner's labor. By looking at what prisoners ate, we see the machinery of empire at work. Food distribution was a tool of control, a way to keep the wheels of Rome turning, and a reflection of the vast bureaucracy that managed every aspect of life. Their food was the surplus of the fields, the leftovers of the powerful, and the basic fuel to keep the system running. Every grain in a prisoner's bowl was a reminder of their place in the social order, and of the empire's reach into every corner of daily life. This isn't just about old recipes. It's about understanding ancient life from the ground up. The food on a Roman plate tells a story of survival, power, and the invisible threads that connected the fields, the prisons, and the palaces. The daily struggle for calories was real, and prisoners were at the bottom. Yet even at the bottom, their meals were shaped by the needs and ambitions of the empire, and by the relentless drive to keep Rome's engine running. Their meals were a direct link to the agricultural heart of their civilization. Every bite connected them to the vast Roman countryside, to the farmers, and to the empire's ability to feed its people, even those behind bars. Food was never just food in ancient Rome. It was power, control, and a measure of worth. On a Roman plate, we find the shocking truth. Even the humblest meal reveals the empire's priorities and the lives of those who lived, worked, and struggled within its grasp. Across ancient civilizations, the foundation of a prisoner's diet was almost always bread and water. This simple combination, found in records from Egypt to Rome, was not chosen at random. It was a deliberate decision, rooted in both necessity and symbolism, and it set the standard for what it meant to survive at the very edge of society. This wasn't just cruelty, it was practical economics. Societies needed a way to feed large numbers of prisoners without straining their resources, and bread and water were the cheapest options available. Grains like barley and wheat were cheap, abundant, and easy to store. They could be harvested in bulk, kept for months, and transported with relative ease, making them the backbone of ancient food systems. Prisoners received coarse, dense bread, often barley, sometimes mixed with fillers like chaff or even ground beans. This bread was tough, filling, and intentionally unappetizing, designed to keep prisoners alive but never comfortable. This basic ration provided energy, but little nutrition or flavor. It was enough to stave off starvation, but not enough to promote health or well-being. Water, too, was often poor in quality, leading to sickness and disease. Wells and rivers could be contaminated, and prisoners had no choice but to drink whatever was provided. Bread and water became a symbol of ultimate deprivation for a reason. It was the bare minimum, a daily reminder of punishment and exclusion from society's comforts. To be reduced to this diet was to be stripped of community and identity. Meals are often social, But for prisoners, eating became a solitary, joyless act. It was the absolute minimum a society would provide. Anything more was considered a luxury, reserved for those who had not broken the rules. The phrase survives because it captured the harsh reality of ancient incarceration. It endures in our language as a shorthand for the most basic, most meager existence. Food was fuel, stripped of pleasure or dignity. Every bite was a reminder of one's status and the boundaries of mercy. The combination of poor diet and unsafe water made prison life a daily struggle. Malnutrition, dehydration, and illness were constant threats, making survival itself an achievement. Bread and water was more than a meal. It was a statement of exclusion, a clear message that the prisoner was no longer part of the community, but merely being kept alive at the lowest possible cost. The Roman Empire's approach to feeding prisoners was highly organized and pragmatic. Food was not simply a matter of charity or basic human need, it was a calculated tool of governance, woven into the very fabric of Roman control. The state understood that sustenance could be used to maintain order, extract labor, and reinforce hierarchies within its vast territories. Prisoners in mines or quarries received rations similar to soldiers: coarse bread, olive oil, cheap wine, and sometimes beans or lentils. These meals were basic but designed to keep bodies working, ensuring that the empire's infrastructure and economy kept moving forward. These rations were an investment in labor. The state calculated exactly how much food was needed to keep a worker productive, but not a morsel more. Food was fuel, and every bite was measured against the value of the work extracted. Urban prisoners awaiting trial or execution fared worse, often relying on family for food or surviving on the bare minimum. For those without outside support, hunger was a constant companion, a silent reminder of their expendability in the eyes of the state. Gladiators, though prisoners, had specialized diets to bulk up for the arena: barley, beans, and extra fat for protection. Their meals were engineered for strength and spectacle, turning food into a weapon for survival and entertainment. Food allocation reflected a prisoner's value to the state. Those who could work or fight received more, while the powerless were left with scraps. The system was tiered. Laborers got more, the expendable got less. This hierarchy was visible at every meal, reinforcing social order and the priorities of the empire. Food was a tool, fuel for work, a cost to be minimized, or preparation for spectacle. The state's grip extended from the fields to the prison cells, controlling not just bodies but appetites and ambitions. Compassion was rare, utility was everything. The needs of the empire always outweighed the needs of the individual, and mealtime was a daily reminder of that harsh reality. The Roman state measured worth in calories. Every portion was tallied, every loaf weighed, and every mouthful justified by the empire's relentless logic. Every meal served a purpose, calculated by the needs of the empire. Food was never just sustenance, it was policy, discipline, and power, all served on a wooden plate. In Rome, food was governance in action, a daily, tangible expression of who mattered and who did not. In ancient Egypt, the line between laborer, slave, and prisoner was blurred on state projects. Workers on tombs and pyramids, often captives or criminals, received substantial rations, bread and beer as staples. Beer was thick, nutritious, and a main source of hydration. Vegetables like onions and garlic were common, believed to ward off illness. Fish from the Nile, and on rare occasions, meat supplemented the diet. Records show the state managed rations with precision to maximize output. The pharaoh's monuments depended on a well-fed workforce. In Egypt, food was the fuel for building eternity. In ancient Athens, prisons mostly held people awaiting trial or execution. Socrates' case shows that citizens could receive food from friends and family. The state rarely fed prisoners. Social connections determined survival. Foreigners, slaves, and the poor relied on minimal state rations, usually coarse barley bread and water. Hard laborers, like those in the Laurian mines, got the bare minimum to keep them working. Life expectancy was short. Justice was about status, not fairness. Food in prison reflected your place in the community. Citizenship meant privilege, even behind bars. If you had no one, you had nothing. In ancient China, prisoner diets were dictated by strict legal codes. Prisoners worked on massive projects like the Great Wall, fueled by millet in the north and rice in the south. Rations were simple, unseasoned porridge with portions based on labor intensity. Pickled vegetables and fermented soybeans added nutrients and flavor. Meat was rare, reserved for officials. The system was bureaucratic, designed for efficiency, not comfort. Food was a tool for control and productivity. The emperor's power extended to every bowl of grain. In the pre-Columbian Americas, prisoner diets are harder to trace. Among the Aztecs, captives destined for sacrifice were sometimes fed luxurious foods, maize, turkey, cacao, as part of ritual preparation. This was about religious symbolism, not kindness. The Inca used prisoners for labor, feeding them staples like potatoes, quinoa, and maize from state storehouses. Food was practical for laborers, ceremonial for sacrificial victims. These practices show food as both sustenance and spiritual preparation. Each culture's approach reflected its worldview and priorities. There was no single story, just many ways food, power, and captivity intertwined. In the Americas, food could mean survival or sacred transformation. Prisoner meals reveal the values and priorities of ancient societies. In Rome and China, food reflected economic utility. Laborers got more, the expendable less. Across cultures, cheap grains formed the base of prisoner diets. The elite ate well, prisoners got the bare minimum. Food was a marker of status and a tool of control. In Athens, family ties determined survival. In Aztec culture, ritual dictated rations. Providing or withholding food was an exercise of power. Studying these diets exposes the harsh realities of justice and survival. What is the minimum owed to a person? For most of history, it was very little. Prisoner food was about purpose, not well-being. These meals strip away romanticism and reveal the true nature of ancient power. They remind us how far our ideals of human rights have come. The story of ancient prisoner diets still echoes today. Modern prison food debates mirror ancient calculations of cost and adequacy. Nutritional standards are new. Cheap grains and starches remain common. The logic of feeding the cheapest calories to captives persists. Studying the past helps us measure progress and understand our systems. Every simple meal connects us to generations who survived on the bare minimum. Food history reveals our triumphs, inequalities, and needs. What will you discover next?